So hello and welcome. My name is Jennifer Rittner. I'm a member of the faculty in the Products of Design program at the School of Visual Arts, an MFA program. Welcome to the second of 3 open houses hosted by POD for the fall of 2020. But we're going to begin by taking a moment to acknowledge how and where we are situated in this space. While we're all dispersed in our various homes, cities, and countries, SVA, the institution hosting this event and our studies, sits on land historically stewarded by the Lenape people, who made their homes here for thousands of years until they were forcibly displaced by settler colonialists in the 17th and 18th centuries. New York City is still home to over 115,000 intertribal people who work and create culture on the island of Manhattan, the surrounding lands, and throughout Turtle Island, or what we now know of as the Americas. So, as we assert our own forms of cultural, intellectual, and economic dominance through professional practice, let us remember that Indigenous people and communities are engaged in a centuries long effort to reclaim sovereignty against an oppressive government that negotiated in bad faith and has continued to break treaties that might otherwise have enabled tribal nations and Native communities to build equity for communities across this land. Let's also remember that COVID-19 has affected Native American communities disproportionately as a result of systemic discrimination. And lastly, let's remember our own responsibility in dismantling oppression by design through our words and practices, even when it means ceding power and platforms to others. So, to that end, today we're engaging in a conversation about how designers and design educators use the learning space of products of design to investigate and interrogate the intersections of design, equity, justice, and social value. So, the topic of our open house session tonight is Design for Social Value, Navigating Business and Justice. And as we, oh, wait, we're not advancing for some reason. Hold on, slight tick there. Okay. As we share our thoughts with you, we invite you to share yourselves with us. So please feel free to type in the chat your location and one issue of social concern that interests you or you would like to investigate in your studies or practices. And I invite our hosts, participants, guests do the same because we're all sharing in this space together. POD actually welcomes several convergences, of which design for social value is one. The other two were and will be explored in our other open house events. We invite you to attend the third on Monday, January 11th, when students and faculty will present the topic, The Actualized Designer Between the Personal and the Professional. And if you missed the first event on November 11th, you can find the recording on the POD website to see our colleagues discussing product design, negotiating the digital and the physical. If you'd like to receive updates from the department, please feel free to add your name to our mailing list. And while we promise not to send you unnecessary correspondence, we will send you our weekly, very informative newsletter that includes updates on student, alumni, and faculty activities and goings-on in the department. If you visit our website at productsofdesign.sva.edu, you can learn more about the program, read our department's manifesto that outlines our foundational values, review the curriculum and courses, meet the core faculty, as well as our colleagues who contribute to workshops and guest lectures where they share insights, case studies, skills, and often the kinds of personal anecdotes you can only get if you're in the room. And in addition to the core curriculum, students participate in a number of professional practice initiatives, including our annual job fair called Design Match, which welcomes around 30 companies every year to meet with students one-on-one. We also have POD's partnership initiative with the Museum of Modern Art's Design Store, which we're really proud to say offers students an opportunity to design products for the museum's wholesale catalog. We hope that this information session will encourage you to apply, which you can do by January 15th using the link on our website. And there is really tons of information on the site, which we're not going to go over in detail today, but we really invite you to spend time there and reach out to us with any questions. Today, of course, is about people, and principally it's about you who are here visiting us, but also it's about our current students, alumni, faculty, and all of the people, consumers, communities, and users we serve. So we're going to start off by meeting our alumni and students, and we have 6 of them with us today. Thank you. We have Julia Lindpaintner, Regena Reyes, Andrew Schlesinger, Karan Bansal, Susan Zhang, and Rhea Bhandari, and they will share their work with you. And then we'll introduce you to 3 members of the faculty, Suma, Reddy, Toshi, Mogi, and Shanti, Mathew. And we will actually then engage with an open conversation among the entire group about the issues of teaching and learning that we're engaged with. So the format is as follows. Everyone's favorite part is first. Alumni will share their thesis work and current students will share work in progress. Then the faculty will join us to have this conversation. And then afterward, we're going to make sure that we leave time for guests to mingle with all of us on Rally. And you'll find the link to Rally, this after party, in the chat at the end of our presentations. But for now, you just need to know that you have to use a Chrome browser in order to use Rally. So if you don't already have Chrome, go ahead and download it now while we're doing our presentations. And that way it'll be ready for you to jump into as soon as we are done. In the meantime, please queue up your questions. Anything you want to ask us, please put in the chat. We are more than welcome, really, to respond to you after the presentations are over. And thank you for being here. And let's get started with our first student presentation. Julia, I'm going to pass it on to you. We're going to give Julia a moment just to get herself set up. And Julia, I see your slides beautifully. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. My name is Julia Lindpaintner. I graduated in the class of 2017. And I'm coming to you from Pittsburgh. And I have a few projects that I wanted to share that I did during my time at POD, and I'll talk a little bit about what I've done since. I came to POD from Pentagram, which is a graphic design and branding firm, and I worked there as a project manager and was really interested in POD for the breadth of design disciplines that it would expose me to and getting to work in a lot of different media. So this project is called Orator. I designed it as a karaoke app for public speaking, and this was an opportunity to try some digital interface design that used a karaoke way of interacting in order to improve your public speaking, but it also gave me the opportunity to try out some products, some physical product design. And in the second year, I revisited this project with some classmates during a business and leadership class to think about how this product and service could be operationalized. Totally different in a class called Customer Brand Experience. We did a project, a couple of classmates and I worked on a fashion product, a commuter dress for biking that was inspired by my daily commute on City Bike from East Harlem down to SVA. And I also was lucky enough to participate in the ongoing collaboration between POD and MoMA Wholesale and develop these fold by number napkins that are being sold in MoMA design stores. But the most profound experience during POD was working on my thesis, which I titled Justice by All. And this was inspired by serving on a grand jury in between the first and second years of POD. And that confronted me with the justice system in a way that I hadn't been before and really changed the way that I felt my personal relationship to something much larger, such as the criminal justice or judicial system. And so I went about exploring how one might design for transparency and participation in the judicial system. And that, again, because POD offers such a breadth of experiences and different methodologies, I was able to explore interventions across a spectrum from the judicial space to the civic space, but also across different design disciplines. So I'll share a couple of them here. The first was a service design offering called Civic Perks that was intended to transform jury duty from something perceived as a pain to something that would be a privilege. So I designed several touch points that would guide an individual across the experience of serving on a jury and instill the honor that should be associated with that. Second, from outside the system, I developed a very simple temporary tattoo that would be able to accompany protesters and remind them of their rights. This was imagined as a partnership that could happen between something like Tattly and the ACLU to make those rights and make that a little bit more accessible to folks to participate and actively engage in conversations around criminal justice. Finally, I came up with sort of a new modality for civic action that combined the engagement of a political protest with the joy of a dance flash mob. And we tried this out supporting the Raise the Age campaign and staged a dance flash mob down near City Hall in New York. The thesis work really sparked an interest for me that's been ongoing in how to design in government spaces and with government bodies. And so I had the opportunity to, after graduating, participate in the inaugural cohort of the Civic Digital Fellowship and work at the Census Bureau. In the Census Bureau, I designed some materials that supported the participation in the 2020 census and around partnering with different organizations to encourage folks to participate. And I've also stayed involved with that organization and their umbrella organization, Coding It Forward, designing the branding for that organization and several sub-programs that they run. I then went to Luminary Labs, a strategy and innovation consultancy, primarily because they do a lot of their work with government agencies. And I was interested in understanding what it looked like to work with a government agency from the outside as a contractor. So I joined a two-person D&I design and insights team there, worked on internal projects, but also got to work with the Department of Education on a video series for adult learners. And that brought me even closer into government where I am now. I work at 18F, which is an organization within the federal government. So I am a civil servant. The 18F is part of the General Services Administration. And the way we work is to partner with other federal agencies with the goal of improving the user experience of government services by helping those other agencies build and buy technology. So we do a lot of work that is creating things for organizations like the US Air Force or like the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, which are two organizations that I've had the opportunity to work with. But we also work on products that might be serving across agencies, such as resources.data.gov, which is a resource for folks across government who are working in the data governance and management space. And finally, my most recent and proudest product is my little baby, who's going to be 6 months old next week. And with that, I will pass it over to Regena, who I believe is going to share next.
Yes, thank you, Julia. Hello, everyone. My name is Regena Reyes, and I am currently a second-year student here at POD. Before coming to POD, I did my bachelor's degree in business at Carnegie Mellon, and I served as a senior consultant in cognitive and analytics at International Business Machines, IBM. And most recently, I was an artificial intelligence enablement consultant at KPMG. Since coming to POD, I've had the liberty to work on several service design projects, and I'll share my favorite one today. Cookspace is a service design offering that is geared toward helping homeless people feed themselves with dignity. And like all design projects, it started and still lives here on my wall in Post-it notes as a sketch of what is it and what does it really do? How does it actually work? And what are some scenarios that people might go through if they use this? I was able to take them off of the Post-it notes and create a visual branding for it. And Cookspace is now an experience design concept where wasted food that is being thrown out by major food retailers is repurposed into a low-fee grocery store for homeless people. But it's more than just a grocery store. We also will have spaces that homeless people can cook and store their food so that they have the ability to take advantage of leftovers and feed themselves in a more dignified manner. To create Cookspace, I began with an experience inventory of grocery stores that I frequently visit and some analogous shopping sites, and was able to come up with a list of very pertinent things that are all used to create the experience in shopping at one grocery store or another. I then created a journey through Cookspace where attendees can do several actions. They can cook their food, they can store their food, but most importantly, they can commune with other people and regain that sense of, I'm feeding myself, I'm not getting a handout. I then combined the experience inventory with the journey map to create an experience framework showing how each element in the inventory might relate to the spaces that I've specified, and most importantly, to the people. And these categories and elements, how they interact with the spaces and the people is the meshwork of the experience of Cookspace. I'm currently working on my thesis. I'm looking into how I can use design to leverage the high population densities of urban meccas like New York City to instill resilience in times of crisis. And I have done more Post-it note sketches. This is my favorite way to get started with ideation. And I've been able to take my Post-it notes through to rough prototypes of speculative objects that we might use in times of a disaster, including your own DIY garbage bag hazmat suit, which really works and was surprisingly comfortable. I have since been able to create more high fidelity artifacts like Memento, which is a digital service that enables people to reframe their perspective on disaster, more from a thing that happened and it was terrible into, hey, disasters happen on various scales every day, and I go through tough times every day. And that prepares me for these really, really big events that I seem to find insurmountable. I can actually do this. And so you would download our application and you would share your experiences with challenges on a daily basis, or if you're going through like a major disaster, like the pandemic that we're currently going through, you can share your feelings and your thoughts. And most importantly, you can get support from others and you can see how they have overcome tough times and learn from them. So you would log in and you would see yourself, and then you would see those around you, and you'd be able to anonymously view what's happening. You don't know exactly who this person is, but you know someone in financial district is having a hard time, or they're thinking really deeply about what happened on 9/11. And you might offer them some condolences, or maybe they might offer you some condolences for what you're going through. Additionally, you can use it as your own personal resilience diary. You don't need to share, and you don't need to share your identity. You can just use it as something that you can look at every now and again when you need a boost, or when you're feeling particularly strong, or when you need a push over something and you're like, yeah, I've been through tough times before. I know I can definitely do it. Additionally, you will be able to access resilience coaching based on techniques that are proven and used in the US military, as well as in cognitive psychology. And so what you're interested in is more of a systematic approach to building your individual resilience, that there is an offering for you as well. And so this is Memento. Thank you. I will now invite Andrew to the screen.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I am setting up my Zoom now.
Yes, I can see your screen, Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Andrew Schlesinger. Thanks for having me. A little bit about myself before I jump in. I came to POD from Apple, where I was an engineer, and really excited about POD. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my time there. and what I did after as a design researcher at Charles Park. For my professional work, it's going to be a little bit short because most of it's been pretty confidential, but excited to share about my time at POD. So I'm going to cover 3 projects, starting with thesis. The title of my thesis was Gentle Men, Challenging Adults to Raise Feminine Boys. And a little bit about the logic for how I got to that title and that sort of mission. When I was looking at the dichotomy of masculine and feminine, I was noticing a trend of words associated that are used to describe these 2 characteristics. And the line that I've drawn is splitting it from, I think, what we would say is positive characteristics to something that has a little bit more of a negative connotation. And on the bottom left, what I would call out is what we now colloquially call toxic masculinity. And with this split, what I was finding was that looking at just the positive sections of this binary, there's been a concerted effort to teach girls to be more quote unquote masculine. But I felt like I wasn't seeing a trend towards teaching young boys to take on some of the positive characteristics of what is traditionally considered feminine. And so that was the general premise of my thesis, and going to show a few projects that align with that goal. So the first, I was interested in Boy Scouts, and given that the Boy Scouts is sort of measured based on merit badges, and those merit badges are ultimately what are teaching young boys a value system, thought there might be a way to, kind of align with that goal of teaching feminine value and modifying those badges. So in here, what you'll see is I actually made a few of my own and slid them into that image. Some that might not be really accepted to the non-liberal, perhaps. And so we can line them up on a spectrum from what's probably more acceptable to not so acceptable, as a means to show, there is this spectrum that we're trying to make some change into what we teach young boys. Next, I'm going to show a few ads that were made. Again, sort of questioning what we teach young boys, and I think I was pretty fascinated by the term "boys will be boys." It was something I heard a lot in my research, and I think that's it's sort of something we just generally accept. So I wanted to think about ways that we could challenge that, because it just doesn't have to be the same it's always been. And taking that premise, looking at the sports world where a lot of young boys are influenced by that, and thinking about a brand like Nike, who has a very large voice, and especially an activist voice these days, and potentially taking a stand. The last project for my thesis was called Baby Gym, and I'm actually just going to play the ad and sort of let it speak for itself.
Yeah. Perfect. Are you a new dad? Afraid that a dad bod is on the way? Or can you just not find the time to hang out with your newborn? Well, skip the fears. Lift your baby to shed those pounds, and you'll bond with your baby along the way. Just clip your infant into the patent-pending Baby Gym workout frame to start lifting. You can exercise alone. Squats, bench press, shoulder press, you know the drill. Or if you'd like, you can easily work out with your partner. Baby Gym has been designed for versatility. You add the muscle, she tones down, everybody wins. Baby Gym is on a monthly payment plan, only $5.99 for 12 months. So order today. No babies were harmed in the making of this film. Fees may apply in the cancellation of your subscription service. Work out at your own discretion.
So that's Baby Gym. Baby Gym was a very interesting project for me. It was something that I didn't want to see come into the world, but I spent a lot of hours making it to make a satirical point. So it was tough because a lot of people looked at the product and sometimes said to me they wanted one. That kind of made me cringe. So it was in a very weird line of social critique. But yeah, so that was my thesis work, and now I wanted to show a little bit of some of the work that I did in the MoMA partnership with my classmate Smriti. These projects were all within the direction of making travel products. So here we have a pill box of the Mandarin style. Famous eyes from famous pictures applied to a glasses case. And lastly, also a traveling pill box applied to each day of the week, following the Keith Haring style. Last project from POD was actually, it was with Jennifer right after we graduated, was a partnership with the Meteor Network. And in this project, we were tasked with interrogating concept of interdependence and how in our modern society we are all bound together, but sometimes don't always see those threads. And we were looking at ways to reveal interdependence through design. So the project I'm going to speak about was a concept that we prototyped against Netflix. And the thought was, well, what if we, in today's society where we kind of, or at least at the moment and still currently, where we have a more stringent immigration system that's being applied, what if we took that system and we created a filter through Netflix, and your media was had to also pass, the immigration system. So sort of the standard Netflix screen you see here, but what if we took that and said, oh, well, all the top billed actors, if they don't pass our current immigration, you wouldn't be able to consume that media, and things would just start to disappear. And say that actually applied to full production. If everyone down to a PA on a production site also had to pass our kind of modern immigration system, what would that look like? And you start to reveal how we're all connected and how some of the things that we use every day might not actually become available to us. And we were applying some of that logic to the deeper information about the media. So it again reveals how it takes the kind of the globe to make this media that we consume. So yeah, next some of the work I've done professionally. After POD, I went on to a healthcare startup called Trial Spark, and their mission is to bring treatments to patients faster and more efficiently, and they're focused on reimagining the clinical trial. In this role, I was a design researcher, and I focused really on bringing the voice of the patient to the organization at many different touch points. And that involved using a lot of the skills from POD around mapping out patient journey, seeing where patients interact with some of the products that the company was developing, and how we should be interacting with patients and developing that experience, and then also influencing the marketing communication, as for clinical trials that's a real big component of the work. And then next, I was at Apple before product design, and I'm now back there in a different role, still in the manufacturing world, but in a more strategic capacity now. Not really much I can say about that, but happy to answer questions when we get into the Q&A. That is my slides. I'm not sure who's next.
We are going to, right, we're welcoming Karan. Thank you, Karan.
All right.
Thank you, Andrew.
So, hi everyone. Thank you all for joining here. I am Karan Bansal, and I'm currently in my second year at POD. Just to give some background, I come from the city Aurangabad, named after the famous Mughal emperor, and I'm currently in New York. Before coming to POD, I did my mechanical engineering and then worked as a software developer for Infosys, where I worked on various proof of concepts for clients based on machine learning and big data. It was while working here that I realized the importance of design when I saw too many projects get thrown away, not because of their technical non-viability, but improper design. I came to know about POD through a friend of mine whose work I really admired. When I got to know she didn't get selected for the program. And then after looking at the program, I decided it was a good fit for me because of its focus on ethics and integration of business and engineering considerations. So I'm just going to walk you through like some of the various life over here. Like it was the first semester we were just doing so many things. This is a photo I think from the second week of three-dimensional product design with Sinclair, and he's talking with this new vocabulary of like shapes of balance and compositions and dimensionality and their emotions. It was a completely new way to look at the world for me, and I wish I can keep taking that course again. This is something I did for Making Studio by Becky. This is a product called Tattle Brush, which is an internet-enabled brush that posted on Twitter or Instagram if you forgot to brush twice every day for 2 minutes. This is the work that we did for video storytelling by Michael, where we had to make a product commercial for one of the products. I chose to design a commercial for the Tattle Brush. And we went from scripting to storyboarding to production and shooting and editing to screening and Oscar night. The best part was, I think, when we were asked to keep the trophies back after just like half an hour of receiving them. We were also writing manifestos for Point of View through Rob, trying to understand and articulate our personality and work, and then converting it to a graphic form. This is a project that we recently got completed with. It was a team project comprising of me, Yufang, and Crystal. This was for the course Product Branding and Experience taught by Leonor, where we had to create a product, brand, and an experience that strategically nudged the user's behavior towards a goal that had less of an environmental impact. And we were not just greenwashing things by making them recyclable only. So we looked at the problem of, our team looked at the problems of pens systemically and created a set of pens and stands for the workplace designed for non-portability and reusability. We also had to come up with CMF, color, material finishes, and the packaging, and some of the brand campaigns. Next, I'll talk about my thesis, which I'm currently exploring, called Half-Life, which is about navigating choice in time-impoverished workplaces, where I'm exploring the question about how can design interventions recontextualize constructs of time towards more freedom of choice. It started all messy, but then after mapping out all readings through summer and work, we look at our thesis question each week through different lenses. And I just share some of the lenses. For the first week, we looked it through the lens of DIY and speculative products. And I came up with a product called Timescape, which is a time perception dilation kit. It's an injectable neural hack that breaks the perceived constructs of time, like order, duration, and change, by modulating the neural mechanisms in the brain responsible. For example, changing the response time of stimuli of auditory and visual systems, we would perceive single events as different events. Kind of similar to the thunderstorms wherein we see the lightning first and then hear it. This was one of the brand campaigns I did for Timescape. The following week, we looked at our thesis through the lens of a service, wherein I came up with Hiatus, which is an app that disables timekeeping and other quantitative interfaces that are designed to get work done, which inform our value in the personal realm. I would replace these interfaces with qualitative ones without losing out on the synchronizing abilities. This is just a glimpse of how one of the feature works. So when it's almost time, like 5 p.m., the app would replace the clock with a qualitative one and give more vocabulary to time as we experience it, and probably hint of what we should do, giving us back the reign of control. Another week, we looked at thesis through the lens of a wearable, where I outsmarted the assignment and created a watch app instead. It's just one of the benefits of not having grades. So Bloom helps the user stay focused by providing task-based visual cues instead of time-based on the watch app. In my case, each petal corresponded to the important things you wish to achieve that day. And at the end of the month, one could see an infographic of their tasks and then order merchandise with the created patterns on it. Thank you all for listening. It was good to see you. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or would like to know anything else. And now I'm delighted to introduce you all to Susan.
I'm gonna share my screen.
We can see your screens now.
Thank you. So here I'm gonna start with my, sorry a little bit. So I'm gonna start with introduce my story from the city that has affected my design past. So firstly, I come from Wuhan. Since this city is so famous this year, I want to tell you something, some other things that is interesting. So Wuhan is the 4th design city in China, other than Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. So if you, in the future, if you have any design project in China, you may want to think about Wuhan. And then Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a city that I went for a cooperating program. And when I arrived there, I loved it instantly, because as you may know, Milwaukee is on the Rust Belt in the United States, and there's a lot of abandoned factory buildings that nowadays are art galleries. And so as Wuhan, so I love the similarities with Milwaukee and Wuhan. The year I spent in Milwaukee, I got a degree from the digital fabrication and design. I learned so many digital fabrication skills in this year, and this passion doesn't expire even after I graduate. So I tend to find a job of manufacturing, and then I went to Shenzhen. Fun fact of Shenzhen is, in the past 30 years, if you have any objects in your hand that says made in China, 70% of them are made in Shenzhen. And if that's a electronic product, then the rate would raise up to 90%. That's why I'm there. And when I was there, I was hired by a US trading company, and I was in charge of supply chain management. I started with grab a caliper to go to our vendors to checking our parts, to finally end up with a team with 10 people that is functionally work on QC, packing, logistic, and vendor ordination. Since I'm the head of this department, I have a lot of conversation with my boss of the business strategy. And that's the time that I raised my interest towards business. I remember one time I asked him, like, what excites you most where we are working? He's like, I found the problem and I solved them. I was like, well, that sounds like something I could do too. And then, not for a long time, I found my problem. There's a lady in our office that she is already a mom of 2 kids, but she's still shy to bring out a new pad out of in the office during her period. I was so mad and confused towards this shame, and I decided to make some product to liberate this value out of the cage. And here is my product. it's a tampon that it's a design that based on the tampon recently, and I added some wildlife features in this design, and I named this Go Wild. As you can see, the face of this design, this is basically facing to the young generation. I want this design could help them to know and accept their own body. And this is a project that means a lot to me. When I look back to it, is where my woman consciousness started to awake. And this is also a project that I pitched to Alan back to the interview in March. I was so thrilled. I didn't know how he would react to it, but as you can imagine, he really likes it, and he sent me a link of this. I still remember that my legs were shaking under the table because in the moment I see this page, I knew that I belonged to this program. And then this semester, this is one of my favorite projects in this semester, and this is the mind map of what we did. Back to that time, I was so obsessed with the object and the core spirit, which it means is the value behind the objects. And I was so inspired by RBG with her color, and it's just like it really makes people exciting when they see it, especially as a designer. So I applied this kind of relationship in my own design. The lady you can see in this page, her name is Zhang Guimei. She's a real existing people in China, and she's a chair of a women's high school. She helped thousands of young girls to go to college in the past years, and she really changed them, their faith. And I was thinking about a people that has such big influence would kind of match that what RBG's influence in American society. So, and then I linked her with a random object it's a brush on the left corner. And I gave her a new identity of she is a chair or a founder of this website. And she is a collector of brushes. And she made up this whole brush gallery. In the further page of this website, you could see some fake quotes from her that's telling her story with those brushes collections. And with one of the branch of the brush website is brush mentorship. And the quote here, "I was born as a mountain instead of a stream," is a real quote from the real high school. Is intended to emphasize the kid education, especially the young girls' education. I had so much fun in this class, and this is not only the class that I had this much fun in this semester. Although all of this happened in this messy bedroom, but none of this has ever reduced my enthusiasm toward design. Okay, lastly but not least, fun fact of New York. I knew that New York is such an amazing city, and that hasn't me yet. Well, I'm really looking forward to see you guys in the hopefully 2021. And thank you for listening all of this. And I'm gonna pass my mic to Rhea. I'm not sure how to get it out. Sorry.
No worries.
I think I come lost. Can you take over my share?
No, I think it says you have to.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Perfect. So hi, my name is Rhea Bhandari. Thank you so much for being here. I graduated from POD in 2019. And before that, I studied speculative design in my undergrad at Goldsmiths University in London. So I would love to share bits and pieces of my design journey so far. I'll start with my thesis, which was focused around redesigning experiences for women who were often misdiagnosed and not taken seriously in the healthcare system. So I started by conducting a workshop with women who were either in physical or psychological pain. And if you see on the right bottom corner, you see the pain measurement scale that doctors often use. This is quite inaccurate, considering that if I talk about my pain level, which could be a 9, would be very different from yours. So what I realized was that it's all about effective storytelling for patients, sort of as protagonists, to share their stories for doctors and their caregivers to understand. So I created visual tools for women to visualize their symptoms. And here I formalized this into an app called Paint. What you do here is that you start scribbling in or drawing your pain. You select your specific location, add the intensity, of course, the duration of your episode. And finally, what the app does is that aggregates all of this to create something that I call a painscape that you can share with your doctor. So side by side, I also wanted to test this concept with real people. So I hosted an event called Clinic Charades, where people on one side of the window would illustrate these symptoms from these cards, hoping that the person on the other side can guess these symptoms. And last year I got to present this at the Global Grad Show, which was part of the Dubai Design Week. And I felt like the engagement was very high after people got their own pack of playing cards that they could use with their doctors and other friends. Another project that I was really excited about is the Rani Pink chair. It was sort of a statement piece that to acknowledge and amplify period pain in the workplace. So it's sort of a heated chair that wraps around you like a cocoon. And I created this chair after sort of lots of material and functional explorations, testing usability and comfort, and of course using the VFL, which is our maker space. If some of you haven't gotten a chance to visit, you definitely should. It's the best thing ever. Yeah, and I was honored to be selected to present my thesis at the New York Design Week. And in between these 2 years, I interned at Sloan Kettering, which is a cancer hospital in New York, sort of researching and designing financial toxicity. So cancer as a whole, we don't really think about cancer finance or know too much about what goes on in here. My team and I shadowed doctors and talked to patients, heard their stories, organized workshops with stakeholders in the hospital, conducted tests. So here, I think you have the card sorting, that we wanted to understand what the patient priorities were at different stages of their care. So we did that. Also, I think since money is such a big taboo, no one really wants to talk about it. So we never got a chance to understand the specifics of where the patient was at financially. So we only got to decode it by the kind of phrases that they were using, from I'm struggling to I'm doing fine or very lucky. So yeah, and on an sort of unrelated note, I just think that New York's such an amazing place to connect with other talented humans. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, I got to present my undergrad thesis at the World Maker Fair, which was very interesting. And after graduation, I started working in India at Neuroequilibrium, which is a vertigo diagnostic startup. And I worked on their brand identity, their design language. Later, I worked on the experience of what would look like for their website, the sort of the design of it as well. In order to enhance patient experience, we worked on how the hospital spaces would look like. the medical reports, which currently even the doctors cannot understand. We were trying to change that into something that they could make sense, let alone like patients who had no idea what was happening. Designing Vertigo apps for our patients. But the most interesting thing was pivoting during COVID, because so many priorities changed. What people needed changed. So the app that I just showed to you, we completely pivoted to having an online physiotherapist rehab as the main feature of the app, because that was what was needed at the time. Similarly, brainstorming ways to help migraine patients log their time or log their episodes over time was something that we initially brainstormed. And this was just like a quick 1 hour brainstorm that we did about around diabetes care. So in India, at least, diabetic care wasn't in a part of the essential services, and patients really needed constant help and support around it. So we further iterated this idea to envision this as a service created wireframes. We refined the functions, and now we're doing the design stage of the app as well. Also, something cool I was working on was VR-based rehabilitation for patients with dizziness. And sort of the coolest part about working in a startup is that I get to work on so many projects with different expertise. One day I'm working with Unity developers, and the next I'm doing research on sort of how the relation in between cognition and of older adults and how their chances of fall increase day by day. And here, this is a gamified cognition exercise module that we had built in order to make it better. Lastly, a fun, challenging part of my job is to look into new technology development. So we published the first ever interactive medical ebook with videos and simulations. So being interactive makes it better for doctors to actually give treatment, specified treatment based on the kind of patients we have. So that was really interesting and a super challenging thing to figure out. And lastly, prototyping, which is something that I absolutely love, physical making. So I'm finally working on designing a wearable and the ecosystem around it. I can't talk much about it, but I'm really excited to start working on it. So thank you so much. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. That was, you know, I could just sit there and do another 3 hours of just watching all of your work. I'm so grateful to all of you for sharing that. Can I invite everyone who's here, please, to your level of comfort? We would love to have you turn on your video as we continue this general conversation. And, you know, it just helps us to see who's in the room here with us. I'll just make a couple of observations, and then I'm going to ask our fellow faculty to share a little bit about their work. But I want to make this 2 observations. One is that, you know, these words that so many of you use that really embody and reflect the sense of the values that you're bringing into the space with you. And so some of what I heard was justice, liberation, dignity, humor. You didn't say humor, but there was so much humor in this work. You're dealing with issues of identity, of the spirit, of critique, resilience, and care. And all of these issues, they're all, you know, really showing up in your work. And it's more than just that you have these feelings, is that you're really bringing it into the work itself. And it's you know, I think part of what we do at POD, I hope, is provide space for you to experiment and explore and interrogate how those values can show up in your work. The other thing I wanted to just very briefly state is, one of you used the word messy and you said messy but. And that was a big red flag to me because I said, no, messy is the point of all of it. And so the degree to which you can embrace the messiness, and that being at POD is really a place where you can be just like messy and like let it all go, like be willing to kind of muck around in these thoughts and these ideas and in these questions. And so whether it's messiness in the process or even sometimes messiness in the product itself, that's part of what POD provides the space for. So I'm going to send it off to Toshi, Shanti, and Suma. We'll go in that order just because I said it in that order. Would you kindly just introduce yourself, what you're doing, and what you teach at POD?
Sure, I'll start. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, great. So I'm Toshi Mogi. I am teaching the business structures class. So it's a second semester, first year course in business. So business for designers. And it's great to see the thesis come together because as you've noticed, it's not just the concept or the idea, but I'm seeing things like, what is the value chain of this, and what's the supply considerations, or what are the ecosystems put these together? What are the behavioral nudges that we're utilizing to drive adoption of these? So all of these concepts are part of things that I do cover in the class, and more and more we're getting into topics of sustainability, topics of social impact, and topics of equality as it pertains to business, the corporate world, and the designers' sort of role and responsibility within that that world as well. And really enjoying the topics. The course that I teach covers a lot of the business basics, so enough to make designers confident enough and dangerous enough to go stand toe to toe with their counterparts who maybe business partners or colleagues in these cross-functional teams that are becoming more and more popular. We cover everything from macroeconomics of how the economy works and how the stock market works, and we do a stock market challenge there where people get to choose some companies that they believe will grow over the course of the 15 weeks that we have, and we discuss those, what really drives that and why that's important. More and more the topics of social impact and social equality are becoming relevant in companies. One of the topics that I put in the chat that is very interesting that we're going to get more into next semester is the topic we're calling sort of the next economy, as companies, particularly public companies, are showing more responsibility to not just their stakeholders, so not just the investors, but to their not to their shareholders, but to their stakeholders, to their employees, to their suppliers, and to the community as a whole. And many companies are making that commitment and vow to adhere to these types of principles. And we getting into really what that means and how that affects everyone from their customers of their products and services to their employees and the designers within that within those companies. So I'm glad to be a part of this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Toshi. And I just see you got props from Rhea, who says the stock market challenge is the absolute best. So high praise. Suma, I think I said you next. I can't remember, but let's go to you and tell us like who you are, what you're doing, and what you're teaching.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. So one, I'm constantly so impressed by the work that comes out of students and alum here. So I'm a first year teacher. I've been an entrepreneur for about 15 plus years and a very impact driven entrepreneur. So I started in the Peace Corps, joined a startup that was giving loans to women in India. After that turned into quite a large $1 billion company. After that, spent years in renewable energy, waste management, then hopped over to designing and building indoor farms and co-founded an indoor farming company. And right now I'm a CEO of a agricultural robotics company. So exploring how automation technologies could be used on farms, and personally interested in the ethics around that too, because there's a lot of questions on that. The course that I'm teaching is technically called Design for Sustainability and Resilience, but the angle at which we're exploring it is the future of food, entrepreneurship as activism. So I believe that's why I'm on this panel. I thoroughly and firmly believe, right, the next generation of entrepreneurs will not look like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Bill Gates, and they will be tackling big systematic challenges to sort of push progress and innovation forward in all the ways. And so in this class, it's kind of a seminar style. We explore, what is your relationship with food and the food value chains? We explore entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship? And what are the frameworks to build companies? And we also explore activism and what we can learn from activism and movement building and sort of collective consciousness and power. And then we tie that all together. And the main goal really to answer during this class is can entrepreneurship be a form of activism, right? Entrepreneurship is ultimately a capitalistic activity, and can it? And every week we bring in an entrepreneur who answers this question. They pitch to us like we're investors. We ask questions and then we ask them that question. And especially today, every entrepreneur we're bringing in and every entrepreneur I work with wants to become an activist entrepreneur and figure out with what they're building, how they're building, who they're building it with, can impact change. And so the really cool thing about SVA, every product person is an entrepreneur. You do not, I went to Wharton Business School. You don't see this in business school. Literally every product and designer is an entrepreneur, and it is wild to be like around this level of creativity. And so to see essentially every week, and even these projects, they're designing new companies, and maybe their goals aren't to, be passionate, like grow it for over 10 years, but every single week you guys are building companies, and it's just crazy to me. So I've had a blast teaching this class. The students have been incredible, super bright, smart, engaging, all of the things. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Suma. Yeah, that's tremendous. And I think that idea that entrepreneurship is a form of activism and that design is happening everywhere in every way. As we move over to Shanti, I would say that, not everybody who's teaching the program is a capital D designer. And yet all of the ways in which we are touching these various topics is intersecting with design. And so Shanti, I would love for you to talk about, who you are and what you're teaching and how that intersects with what students are learning at POD.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Shanti Mathew. I am the Deputy Director and actually the COO of a nonprofit called Public Policy Lab. We are based here in New York City, so I'm here in Brooklyn. And we work with government agencies and with low income or otherwise disadvantaged communities on redesigning public services or improving public services together. So much of my work is here with municipal government in New York City, but have worked at other levels of government, but all in the United States. I'm a real domestic policy and service geek. So my academic background is broad, but also in hindsight, you can always find a path to where you are, and mine will probably be pretty obvious. But my academic background is in undergrad sociology, religious studies, and philosophy, and then in my master's studies to date, design and also public management. So I do happen to happily sit at the intersection of all those things. So here at POD, I teach a course that I don't know that it's the most inspired name, so if someone would like to rename it, looking up my current students. I would appreciate that for bonus points, even though you get no grades. Oh no, I can give you a P+, can't I? Yeah, there you go. If you come up with a new name for the class, I'll give you a plus. So we are in a class called Designing Public Policy. The whole goal here is to really see the social structures that are around us. So to be able to walk around the world and to actually observe the invisible and visible institutions, entities, money flows, rules, regulations, services that really define our lives in any given society. And the big question is, what are the things that we need to live a good life, and how do we get them? So things like affordable housing, a quality education, a healthy mind and body, the ability to have a job and have kids if I want to have kids, right? Are these things in a given society a right or a luxury? Who gets access to them, and how do they get it? And if you want to change that, how would one go about changing that? Through public structures. The big thing is the public sector. So the big assignment in class is that students write a policy memo. So what they do is they identify a policy problem. I'm seeing smiles and things in the chat, so I'm really hoping that these are new names for the class. So students identify a policy problem that relates to their thesis topic. And what I mean by policy problem is some sort of something negative in society, or something that we have to deal with that's in the public realm versus the private realm. So it's something that involves all of us, impacts all of us. And so therefore we get a say, and we have a set of public and political processes to deal with that. So that is the big thing over the semester. Students also look at these various social goods and social systems in the context of New York City and one other geography of their choice. And I think that's that. Students, have I missed anything? That seem good?
That's fantastic.
We have guest lectures. Yeah.
We have guest lectures. We have very special guests. And Karan has given me a request for this coming week. So he's here to hold me accountable. All right. Good.
So that's actually a great segue to this next question, which is around the fact that, design and design teaching are emergent practices. There isn't one way of teaching it. There's not one way of practicing it. And in a way, I think that, and I'll be curious to hear this from the students as well as the faculty, and Alan can chime in if he wants to, but you're not on the spot. But this question of how the department is shifting and changing in order to meet the needs of today. And so I'm curious to hear what you all think are the necessary skills to actually be designers of this moment, right? What are the things that you feel are essential for us as we are rethinking our practices, rethinking how we're teaching, rethinking what design actually can do in the world? What are the skills, the methods, the ideas that you think are most essential for our students? Should I call on someone? I'm going to call on Toshi. Since I'm a teacher,
I'll take that. I'll take that question. So I forgot to mention that I do work at Frog Design, and when we normally would have the courses in person, a lot of times the courses would be held in the Frog Studio in Brooklyn. It's a great little excursion across the river to come by. But I use Frog Design as a lab into a potential career path for the students. So what I see going on at Frog, and it keeps changing, I use sort of as that guide. So we're doing a lot of work in the social impact world. We're working with companies who really put impact on the forefront at the corporate level. So we're working with companies like Nike and IKEA and even Danone. And the projects that we're working on with them is helping them in many ways to really define what they're, how they're really making contributions, not just at a superficial level, but at an organizational level. And so I get a little bit of insight into how those teams are operating, how they're prioritizing, what the changing nature of the designer / strategist and technologists within those teams are adapting from even from 5 years ago. And you know, I kind of through the class use case studies, use examples, and use a lot of the Q&A during the sessions to convey how these new skills are evolving.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Suma, do you want to take that?
Can you, I was digesting a lot. Can you restate the question?
I can, and I'm also happy to have somebody jump in. But the question is this: as an emergent practice, what do you think are the skills, the techniques of this moment that are just essential for students to develop, right? For us to be conveying to the students, to give them an opportunity to practice and to learn.
Yeah, thank you for repeating it. So I think this is an awesome question, and it's so timely, right? Because we're seeing these sort of societal shifts in so many ways. And I think one of the things is just this zeitgeist where people want to see the solutions coming from you. We don't want the like traditional quote unquote leaders designing and communicating solutions. It does really feel like, oh, you know, you were born in a rural town outside of Pittsburgh, like talk to us, right? Or if you're a person of color, or if you're queer. And so there's very much this, I think, and I speak from the lens of entrepreneurship, design solutions for you yourself and in your communities, be intentional about that, be conscious of it, understand your ecosystem, your privilege within it, as well as your boundaries and challenges, and work from there. And you know, I can't help but quote two of the past entrepreneurs who spoke, but one of them said, he's from Brooklyn, he's a Black gay male, and he was like, entrepreneurship is my form of protest. Another woman said, I'm not invited to the tables, right? And so like, F it, I'm building my own table with her company. And so I think we're gonna, you know, I think just that sort of energy and intentionality, consciousness will play a role.
Yeah, I'm actually going to ask maybe Julia if she wouldn't mind thinking about, having now been in the field, back in the field again after POD for a few years, if you feel like there is an emergence in terms of your own practice that you are seeing a shift as kind of experiencing the workplace again, having gone through the program. I don't know if that's an entirely clear question, but I'm going to let you run with it.
I'll riff on it on whatever comes to mind here. So I think something that's just been coming to mind as others have been answering this, a shift that happened for me over the course of, you know, from being in the working world and going through POD and then coming back and working in government spaces is I think that through POD, I started to understand design for social impact in kind of two ways. One, as looking for avenues that were very explicitly designed for social impact, agencies or organizations that were very clearly mission driven. And then the other avenue was understanding all design as potentially having or necessarily having social impact, and therefore, regardless of the environment of that design or the kind of projects you work on, bringing that kind of attention to any work that you're doing. And I think something that has emerged more in the circles that I'm in now, I've been finding a lot more attention being shifted to process rather than necessarily product in thinking about social impact. So for example, at 18F, we've had folks come to talk to us about trauma-informed design and thinking about design ethics in the way that users or participants are recruited and communities are engaged with to do the research that supports the design product at the end of the day. And so that's a shift that I think is really interesting, and will continue to be something that I would like to continue to learn about and think about more.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And Rhea, I'm going to send this one to you now, because some of the things that Julia talked about here and that I'm hearing even from other faculty is how important positionality is, who you are bringing into this work with you. Because my memory of you working on your thesis is you had been deeply embedded in witnessing the medical practice through, I believe it was your own mother's work. And so, you were really bringing her into the spirit of her work, her practice into the design that you were making. And so can you talk about how you are, in a way, we've talked in the past about empathy, and I wonder if we can even explore the limits of empathy at some point, is something that we've talked about in the program, but how, in fact, being a keen and insightful and intentional observer of other people's lives is a part of your practice.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think, first of all, just about my thesis, and in terms of how large the rates of misdiagnosis were with women, I felt really uncomfortable initially being a part of the healthcare industry. All my family is in it. I've worked in it. I was super uncomfortable that I didn't know how big of an issue this was. So that is why I wanted to understand more, and of course got people from all around, and people in order to sort of to know their perspective. I also think in terms of empathy, and if we look into business right now, what POD taught me, what the company wasn't initially doing, was we often look at how a new technology can be beneficial for a person or a patient, and then they sort of build products accordingly. But what we have been taught at POD, and how now we're working in neuroequilibrium, or any company that I would want to, is that we now look at the problem based on the kind of patients that we interact with, the doctors, the panel of doctors we have at each stage, and then work or find out which technology suits best for the kind of patients that we're tackling and or helping. So yeah, so that's how we've been.
Yeah. Rhea, I loved the work that you showed from actually your recent work of the digital medical manual that actually shows bodies in motion. And it occurs to me that Karan's work sort of intersects with this, and I'm going to throw it to him now, because I think that this element that the students learned this year through Liz Jackson and Alex Haggard's class was the critical element of time, and how you actually need to be able to understand the movement of people and the flows of ideas, but just the physical experience of time, which is something that I think you captured in that work, Rhea. So Karan, what that makes me think of is the way in which there are these like really practical solution building framings that we sometimes do at POD, but then there are also these larger meta framings. And so time as a meta framing could be really big. And I wonder if you can just talk about, in the process of developing this thesis, how do you take an idea like time and turn it into something that you can actually design around?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, time is something that kind of we're born with. It's like fish, we embody it. So, I mean, that's one of the first things that we do every time we get up in the morning. So, I mean, like the difficult part about my thesis is communicating about this concept that we are so embedded in. So what I kind of figured was through, like, by talking to subject matter experts and through just kind of mapping out the whole system and like brief history about where it all started from, starting from looking at like various US patent searches about how timekeeping came to be at its state right now and what it was before. So, kind of then backtracking it and then again dealing with the tensions between what the advantages of what time got about like synchronizing to the minute and kind of living in with a way with the consequences that it got and just kind of trying to balance it around like the various stakeholders and how we could realize or like be more aware and have like more control over it in the first place.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Karan. Andrew, I'm coming to you because if I remember correctly, when we were invited by the Omidyar Network to try to design around a really easy problem like polarization, we were like, yeah, we got this, is easy, right? I mean, this was a huge challenge, is to just find some structure around which to even approach a set of design solutions. So can you talk about what it was when we had just like interdependence, polarization as our topic? Can you talk about that process of kind of bringing it down to something that was actually prototypable?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember that scramble, that 6 weeks where we had like 1 week to come up with principles and 2 weeks to design and 1 week to present. I think, if I remember right, we started with a lot of reading, right? We were just like, let's understand what have people said about this topic. And then we pretty quickly went into quote unquote the field, right? Like talk to people, let's hear how this impacts their day-to-day. And we were, I think, pretty diligent about taking notes, kind of seeing where things are connected. And we were trying to find principles to design with, right? Like what are the elements that we should always go back to? What's our North Star? And it was an iterative process, it was design, right? So we were sort of making along the way. And I think we made some prototypes that people could interact with to help us get immediate reactions, to help reinform our design principles. I think it was challenging because we didn't have a framework at the start. We had to create one along the way. I'm blanking on exactly how we landed where we did. Do you remember? Do you have any insight into that?
Oh, I remember a lot of it, but Alan even said this in the chat, like that Netflix plugin that you developed as one of the prototypes, was really powerful because what it didn't do was try to solve the problem of people being polarized. It tried to address particular lens through which we could understand our interconnected world. And so I think that what everyone was able to do was to kind of home in on one particular area of opportunity, right? And that North Star, that set of principles, allowed you all to stay really focused and I'm going to come back to you, Toshi, in a second, and to use a kind of methodology that allowed you to be messy and intentional, right? To prototype and iterate, and then to learn something, to test it out just a little bit to help push it further, right? That's my memory. And so, Toshi, if I can bring it back to you with Frog's methodology, what is the structure that you bring when the question is so big that it feels almost insurmountable?
Very interesting. We have several ways to look at that, but one of my favorite is something we call future casting, which is it's a scenario planning technique that we use to look at various trends and directional behaviors. And instead of trying to predict the future of what something might be when we have a problem that we don't know where it's going to end up, we just create these possible futures, and we create 3 or 4 different ones, right? One might be very optimistic, like Star Trek, right? And one might be very, pessimistic or dystopian, like Blade Runner or something, right? And then we start to, figure out how are we solving these problems in these different worlds? How is it different? Then we start finding what the core attributes are that we should be pushing and pulling on, that maybe are connecting both of these different worlds or are very polarized in those different worlds. And so that's a technique that helps, kind of make more sense out of these more abstract ideas or just big challenges. And we have other techniques as well, but it's a skill to know when to apply to different tactics. And there's not just one, but there's different ways to approach one of these crazy problems. And a lot of times the cross-functional teams that we have really helps because we can see the problem from different perspectives, from the engineering perspective, from the sort of creative perspective, as well as from different cultures and different set of biases. We're able to look for ways in which we can almost trial and error find a way to move things through. But the visuals is always kind of the common ground. So I always encourage the teams to start drawing things, start putting pieces together so that we can all visually use the space to start sense making.
Yeah. And I think that and I cannot remember who it was who showed the 3D PD, the three-dimensional product design class of Sinclair's, but that idea of putting shapes to things, right? And to actually looking at the principles of an aesthetic, right? Of an object, just balance, just the idea of balance, like putting that, manifesting these deep concepts into a physical form is so much of what POD allows for students to do. And I just want to hold the thought that, look, we are in this really complicated space where all of our students right now are working in their own spaces. We are not in a studio together. We do not have access to the Visible Futures Lab. So, a lot of the work they're doing is, if I can actually crib from Regena, is using the resilience of your own space, of your own mind, of your own creativity to manifest these ideas. And I think there's something both really empowering in that, and also, less than optimal, right? Suboptimal. But to see the kind of work that everybody is doing, because that spark is there for everyone, I think gives us hope that as we move back into physical spaces with one another, there's just going to be potentially an explosion of creativity and of collaboration that I hope to see when everyone is back together in our space. And we're about to hit 8:30. I did not get to ask everybody a follow-up question, but I am going to ask this one thing, and I'll give you a second to think about the answer to this. Julia had said, and I completely agree, all design has social value. The question is really, what are the social values we are bringing into our work? And often when we ask that question, we want to know about the problems or the challenges that we're looking to face. But I wonder if everybody can just name an affirmative value that you are bringing into the space of your practice, your teaching, or even your life in this moment. Can each of you just share with us one positive affirmative value that we can end our evening, this part of our evening together, as we move into the rally after party? And only because you're in a row here, I'm going to start with Regena. Can you share with us one affirmative value?
Yeah, I was actually hoping I wasn't first, because I'm like, I need to really think about this. So I'm going to steal from my thesis. And I would say it is the concept of resilience, but not in a traditional sense. And I think it's helping people understand that their form of resilience might look different from mine and everyone else's, and encouraging people to lean into the individual and as well as the interpersonal, and understanding how each person's definition of resilience can interact to create something positive for the collective.
Beautiful. All right, I'm putting in the chat who's going to go next. Andrew, you're next.
Yeah, I was thinking about, with my current work, which is very heavy and cross-functional work, I think equality of voice, making sure that everybody has access to share their opinions.
Rhea.
Sorry, I didn't see that. As you mentioned, also empathy, but so we're all at clinics every day after work, and we see how patients are elated, super excited after they come into the clinic on a stretcher and go by walking and sort of singing. So it's just like really amazing, that feeling that you have. And most of the people in the company are not healthcare related, but to be able to make that difference is just the motivation that keeps us going. Yeah.
Thank you, Rhea. Julia.
I would say inclusion is something that is always really top of mind for design, should be top of mind no matter what you're doing in design, but it's been really a privilege working in a government space to know that it is an absolute responsibility to have the work, the services and products that are being designed work for and reach everyone. And it demands much more creativity, and it demands much more persistence. But that is a really strong value that I hold.
Thank you. Karan.
Yeah, I would say manners. I think learning from your class that everything is kind of situated in a cultural model. So giving something its due course and kind of manifesting the work that brings us what we are best at and kind of grounding it between people. So yeah.
Toshi.
And I'm gonna kind of cheat, and I'm gonna use trust as the value, which is becoming more and more important these days. I say it's cheating because it really is encompassing many different values within it. So in particular, competency, reliability, empathy, and aligned interests. So all of those sort of bubble up into this value of trust.
Yeah, thank you. Susan.
I would say the equal rights. This year I've been seeing and involved with some case that it like happens in our society, and I've seen how much the power, how strong is the power that you fight for, equal rights to different people, and that's something that I'm heading to in the future.
Great, thank you. Suma.
I think I'll chime in with authenticity. So knowing yourself, right, as sort of a really important thing to work on, and whether that's, I mean, for me, like being queer, but I think also many people in this room have taken the road less traveled, a meandering path from like corporate to product, and yeah, knowing yourself and being yourself.
Thank you. Shanti.
My value is love. I thought of a bunch of other words. Then I thought, what the hell? Actually, all those things are really they're about love at the end of the day. It's about not as a feeling or a soft kumbaya thing, but as a really strong, forceful struggle for humans to seek good for other humans.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing that I want to pursue in my intimate relationships and in the political system in which I'm involved, and everything in between.
Thank you. And I'll just add that mine is joy, because I think that so much of what we can do in art and design is bringing joy into the world, whether that's through the physical manifestations, visual, the aesthetic. That is, I think, a value that I see in so much of the work that you've all presented, and all of the work that our students at POD are developing. Whether these things actually see the light of day, there is something so just deeply meaningful and powerful in expressing and exploring those ideas as a student, doing it as a student, right? Being a student for a while, which is like such a gift, I think. So I'm really grateful to all of you for being here, and for our guests. We are going to move this into Rally. We've got another 25 minutes to be together today. I don't know what time everybody is in. So here's what happens. Somebody is going to, I hope, put the link to the Rally, thank you, after party, thank you, Elspeth, and Marco did it as well, in the chat. But before you leave this space, just know that you need to copy and paste it into your Chrome browser in order to be able to get into Rally. And I had to make a note to myself to remember to tell you that when you put your name in, please add a suffix that identifies you as an applicant, a student, an alumnus, faculty, so that when we're in Rally, we know who each other is if we haven't met before. And that way you'll know who the faculty and students are if you want to come and meet us. So we look forward to seeing you there. And that's it. We're going to close this down and see you in the after party. Bye, everyone.